When Dead by Daylight first launched back in 2016, survivors had only 5 items: medkits, flashlights, toolboxes, maps, and skeleton keys. These items were certainly decent enough on their own, but there wasn't much flavor when looking at them each individually. They each served a very specific function, and that was pretty much it. In September of 2016 though, some new variations of each item were added to the game, alongside some new add-ons as well to help spice things up. Having more items and add-ons with distinct differences and rarities allowed for some items to have more unique purposes in a typical trial, thus allowing for more creative build ideas. For example, think of toolboxes. Instead of having only one toolbox to select from, survivors now had a more interesting decision to make. Will the toolbox that provides faster repair speeds be more useful, or will a toolbox that provides faster sabotage speeds be more useful? Or perhaps picking the toolbox that provides more overall charges, which would allow for better flexibility with both sabotaging and repairing. And this is all before considering any add-ons, of course. Simply put, small complexities in items and add-ons encourages a little bit more build variety while also allowing players more agency in what happens in a match. Shortly after these new items and add-ons were added though, survivors would be gifted with a totally brand new item. One that would not only become an instant favorite for many players, but also become the first item to only be available for a temporary amount of time. When reflecting back on the past decade of DBD though, I can't help but think that this item was gently put off to the side and essentially forgotten about as time went on. And it's especially sad to think about given the potential plans that the devs talked about years ago. And it's even worse when considering the amount of brand new stuff that's been added to the game as of late. It's almost like a confirmation that this item has been knocked off of any kind of priority list. The brand new item that I'm referring to arrived in early 2017, with that being the Chinese Firecracker. This item was introduced during the Lunar New Year, and thus why it was only available for a limited time. Firecrackers function mostly as another method to blind the killer. However, there are a few unique differences between firecrackers and flashlights. First, in addition to blinding the killer, firecrackers also create a loud noise that can deafen the killer. As tracking survivor sounds like footsteps and grunts of pain is super important, firecrackers could be a useful tool to stealthily escape the killer when successfully used. And successfully using firecrackers is where things differ again from flashlights, as the timing to land a firecracker blind was different from flashlight timing. This provided survivors with a new skill to master, as it made going for killer grasp rescues a bit more challenging. Another major difference between flashlights and firecrackers is that firecrackers are a one-time use. Once a firecracker is thrown, it cannot be retrieved or recharged in any way. In other words, if the firecracker failed to blind the killer, it was essentially wasted. This is made even worse when considering that firecrackers are a limited time item. Because they first appeared during a special event, there's no way to reliably restock them. And because of this, survivors were given a new choice: collect firecrackers as a special souvenir, or use them because they were fun and something different. This dilemma would soon be put on pause, however, as the first winter event for Dead by Daylight in late 2017 introduced a new variation of the Chinese Firecracker, with that being the Winter Party Starter. Although these two items differed in name and appearance, they functioned the exact same way. The Winter Party Starters, while still a limited time item, did appear a bit more frequently in the Blood Web, so survivors did have an easier time stocking up. Both of these items reappeared in 2018 and 2019 during their respective seasonal events. And then in the summer of 2019, during Dead by Daylight's 3rd anniversary, another new item was added, with that being the 3rd year Party Starter. This Party Starter functioned just like the first two versions. However, the 3rd year Party Starter would end up being a much more limited time item. As the item is named after, of course, this was only available during the 3rd anniversary event in the summer of 2019. As a result, the 3rd year Party Starter would become a little bit of a legacy artifact. One fun fact about this item though is that it did randomly reappear in the Blood Web during the 2021 Lunar New Year event. So although it was intended to be a one-time appearance, it did end up reappearing on accident one more time. For the next several years though, both the Chinese Firecracker and the Winter Party Starter would continue to reappear every year in their respective seasonal events. However, things didn't remain the same for much longer. During the launch of the first Resident Evil chapter in the summer of 2021, a new perk called Flashbang was introduced. Serving as a teachable perk for Leon S. Kennedy, this perk allowed for the creation of a limited item, with that being a flash grenade, of course. The flash grenade operates as a reusable version of firecrackers and party starters, as it's only craftable and usable during a trial. Most importantly, this meant that firecrackers and party starters could be conserved. However, starting in 2024, the Lunar New Year event was indefinitely retired in favor of the Blood Moon event. As a result, the Chinese Firecracker would no longer be able to spawn in the Blood Web. And due to this new limitation, the Winter Party Starter became the only option for any kind of firecracker outside of flash grenades. And ever since the Lunar New Year event was retired, there's been nothing new when it comes to firecrackers and party starters. The only somewhat noteworthy update that's occurred is that Winter Party Starters were able to be looted from chests with double charges, and this is all thanks to the rework Streetwise received in 2025. In short, this is possible because Streetwise allows for any item looted from a chest to have almost double the charges. However, because Winter Party Starters are a limited time item, this feature can only be taken advantage of when this item is in season. So outside of this indirect buff from Streetwise, zero innovation or new variations of these items have been released. And while these event items do have an intriguing history, what's the objective in summarizing the chronicles of firecrackers and party starters? To put it briefly, it's because firecrackers and party starters have so much potential, only for them to be mostly forgotten. There was reason to be hopeful for meaningful updates and or innovations during the first 5 years of this game, and the evidence is there to prove it. 3 variations of the same item were created alongside a reusable version in the form of a perk. On top of this, the devs even openly stated during dev streams years ago that there was interest in building on the idea of firecrackers and adding more variations of them, and more specifically one that is permanently available. And I have to imagine some add-ons would have been considered as well, as it seems like an obvious way to add more layers to a rather simple item. However, between the indefinite suspension of the Lunar New Year event and Chinese firecrackers, as well as having 0 new updates to firecrackers in the last 5 years, there is 0 evidence to show that this item is still considered an important item. Perhaps the introduction of Flashbang erased any desire to innovate further when it comes to firecrackers, and hell, between the creation of fog vials and subsequent add-ons, as well as the rework to keys and maps, it's clear that priorities were shifted elsewhere. And that's totally fine and understandable, as it's the prerogative of the devs to update their game how they best see fit. But I can't help but believe that firecrackers deserve to be a more permanent item in this game. There is at least one reason to remain hopeful though, as firecrackers continue to be available in custom matches, so there's certainly still a possibility of new variations being added at some point. There's plenty of clutter that clogs up blood webs, so why not clean some of that up and add a new permanent version of the firecracker? In addition to this, I am also mildly hopeful that the upcoming 10th anniversary will potentially contain a new version of the firecracker. It's definitely fitting to celebrate such a big milestone with fireworks, so having a new firecracker to go alongside the event would be an easy way to commemorate the occasion. And it's entirely possible that a more permanent version of firecrackers could still come to the game at some point. With so many things going on with this game, there's never not something that needs fixed or changed. And maybe with the attempted quality of life changes being a thing of the past now, more time will be made for new additions or upgrades to previously forgotten features. At least I would hope so. That's all I have for now. Thanks for watching.